2 gigabytes. That is the default amount of RAM that Minecraft Java allocates when you are about to start the game. But is it actually enough? What happens if you try to allocate more or less than that? And overall, will increasing my game memory affect my overall performance? So if you have watched some of my previous videos, then you might know that I have 64 gigabytes of RAM installed on my PC. That means I count in these 3.75% of people according to Steam hardware survey. And I bought this RAM because, well, Adobe and its software loves this part of your system, and for me 64 gigabytes of RAM were literally required to edit my videos properly and without much problems, as I always have at least 5 to 6 programs open at the same time while editing a video, for example. And so today I'm gonna set my Minecraft in many different scenarios to see how RAM really affects the performance in game, where it does matter in the game and where it doesn't, and if it's really worth it buying more RAM in order to get better performance in Minecraft. So let's begin. Alright, so before I start my experiments, here's the RAM that I own, and here are the rest of my PC specs. And so the first experiment that I'm gonna do is super obvious and simple. I'm gonna see if allocating more RAM actually boosts the launch time of Minecraft. I'm gonna test from 128 megabytes of RAM up to 2 gigabytes to see the difference. And without further ado, let's start my experiment. And for that, I'm using Prism Launcher and the latest version of Minecraft by the creation of this video, 1.21.4, without any mods and mod loaders. And let's start with 128 megabytes, which showed a pretty interesting result. 10 seconds after launching the game, it actually tried to load into the main menu, but unfortunately 30 seconds after the loading screen appeared, the game just crashed with the out of memory error. And after that, I decided to double my RAM and launch the game with 256 megabytes, and it actually launched in 14 seconds. Then I doubled it again and it launched 2 seconds faster with 512 megabytes allocated, and same thing can be said to 1 gigabyte and 2 gigabytes of RAM. They all launched in 12 seconds. Overall, allocating more RAM upgrades the overall launch time of Minecraft if you're also upgrading your PC from like 1 gigabyte of installed RAM to 2 or more, because as soon as I started allocating more than 256 megabytes of RAM, the game started showing no difference in launch time. So there is nothing really special to say about it, except when I launched the game with 128 megabytes of RAM, it just got me wondering if the game could launch with this low amount of RAM, but it could launch with 256, then what is the in-between number between these two that is the absolute minimum required for launching the game? And so my next goal is to find the minimum amount of RAM required for launching Minecraft and see if Minecraft is actually playable with this amount. And after some experimenting, this number was found. 181 megabytes of RAM is the least amount required for launching the latest versions of the game. However, it launches with this pop-up stating that Minecraft has run out of memory and that to prevent world corruption, the game has quit, although I just launched it. But that didn't stop me and I proceeded to create a new world. But before that, I just make sure that every possible setting is turned to minimum to prevent crashing. So I'm gonna try to create the least RAM intensive world, and for that I firstly toggled the super flat world and then set the world layer to void, and the game crashed while creating it as well. But this also didn't stop me, so I created this world with 12 gigabytes of allocated RAM, which I always prefer using for Minecraft, and then set it back to 181 megabytes to see if it can at least enter an already generated world, and it didn't work as well. My game just froze and didn't react to anything. So if 181 megabytes is the least amount of RAM required to launch the game, just how much RAM is required to launch the least intensive world? And after experimenting with the numbers once again, this number was found. Now 216 megabytes is the least amount required to launch a world in vanilla Minecraft, but even so, the world also crashes after several minutes of playing and after like having stutters every 3 or so seconds. But obviously, who is going to need that amount in the modern versions of Minecraft, considering that almost no one in this world is primarily using only 1 gigabyte or less RAM? I think it is pretty pointless allocating less than, I'd say, 512 megabytes of RAM in Minecraft. But now you know that in order to play Minecraft, the very least amount of RAM required is 216 megabytes, and if you want an experience without crashes, then 512 megabytes is the absolute minimum for this game. With that said, let's directly get to more serious experiments, because like I said, I own 64 gigabytes of RAM, and from now on my absolute minimum for the experiments will be 2 gigabytes, which are allocated by the standard in the launcher. Now the next experiment that I'm going to do is to simply see how RAM affects the chunk loading speeds and overall performance while loading a big territory, and for that I decided to use the same seed and Bobby mod in order to increase my maximum chunk amount up to 64 in order to simply see how different amounts of RAM can handle it. And on top of that, I am also gonna do a simple world generating speed test to see if RAM also matters in world creation speeds. And finally, for these tests, I decided to pick 6 different amounts of RAM: 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and 48 gigabytes of allocated RAM. Now, you may ask, why not allocate all 64 gigs? Well then, how should my operating system and other programs work while 100% of RAM is being used by Minecraft? It simply would crash my entire system, so I am using a maximum of 48 gigs since my Windows usually uses up to 16 gigabytes of RAM while nothing is running. And without further ado, let's do the tests. Starting with 2 gigabytes, the world creation took around 7 minutes and 33 seconds, which in fact is somehow the fastest result here. And after teleporting to a completely different location and starting to generate the chunks, the game managed to generate them in 1.5 minutes, while giving only 8 to 10 frames per second. Moving on to 4 gigabytes, which managed to generate the world in 10.5 seconds and generate the chunks around me in 1 minute and 20 seconds. And well, same thing can be said to 8 gigs, 16, 32, and 48, because the difference between 2 and 4 gigabytes was the only difference that showed some results at some point. Every test above 4 gigabytes was nearly the same for some reason. 10.5 seconds to generate the world and 1 minute and 20 seconds to generate the territory around me. Almost everything was nearly the same except for the RAM usage. Now, for some reason, the Minecraft process itself managed to use way more RAM than Minecraft's F3 menu showed, so I guess I'll have to trust that one. But anyways, the more RAM I allocated, the more RAM my Minecraft was using, even though, like I said, the results and performance was about the same no matter if I had 8 gigabytes or 48 allocated. And according to MSI Afterburner, my RAM usage went up to 22 gigabytes after the generation when I had 32 gigs allocated. Pretty strange, because if I compare it to 16 gigabytes for example, the RAM usage is significantly less, but the performance is exactly the same. With that said, RAM minimally affects the performance while generating chunks, and nor does it affect the chunk generation speeds. And I kinda expected that the performance would not necessarily be better with more RAM allocated, but I think because what really matters in Minecraft is of course your CPU and GPU in the first place, but still, RAM minimally affected the performance, and only allocating more brings almost nothing. However, where RAM should really get important is when you decide to play with mods or mod packs. So for that, I decided to do a stress test by downloading a mod pack called All the Mods 10 from CurseForge, which contains 414 mods. Yeah, I'm not joking. Alright, here we go. 2 gigabytes of RAM. By the way, the minimum for this mod pack is 6 gigabytes as it states. What is even more ridiculous is that it already uses 1.5 gigs just in the main menu, but it couldn't generate the world and the game just crashed. And after that, I allocated 6 gigabytes as it is the minimum required amount of RAM. And from now on, I'm gonna simply test the overall performance of flying around in a world with 6, 12, 24, and 48 gigabytes of allocated RAM. I decided to quickly do these tests, and here are the results. By doing as simple as just generating the chunks and flying around, 6 gigabytes obviously showed the worst result, and after allocating more and more RAM, my gameplay simply became more stable and better performing as well, having less stutters and micro lags while simply flying around. So with that being said, I think I can come to a conclusion. RAM in Minecraft doesn't really matter a lot in the game if you are considering playing vanilla Minecraft or perhaps with some optimization mods. However, it's important to mention that the 2 gigabytes aren't quite enough for the game. Through my tests, I found out that 4 gigabytes is the absolute minimum that you should allocate for Minecraft, as it always showed a minimum but at some point noticeable difference compared to 2 gigs. However, when I tried to allocate more, I didn't notice any significant difference or whatsoever, except the RAM usage was just bumped up. With that said, the minimum that I can recommend allocating for Minecraft is 3 to 4 gigs if playing vanilla, 6 to 8 if playing with mods, and if you want an overall smooth Minecraft gameplay and you have enough RAM like me to allocate, then the absolutely perfect amount for the game will be 12 to 16 gigabytes, but allocating more will be simply pointless. Subscribe.